This is Reverend Joseph Andrew Jensen, Sr. Okay, I've been making like 3 videos in a row because God has not let me go to sleep. 3 o'clock in the morning, I said, there's no way God will let me go to sleep. Then I made the video. Then I made another video called God's War 9. Now we're going on God's War 10. Because you got to know how everything is. God is so much hope and inspiration. He's been almost like lecturing me. It's almost like when I was in Egypt, in Cairo, for 3 weeks straight. I didn't eat, but it's like I was fasting, but I wasn't hungry. It was like I didn't want to eat because God was actually, what he was telling me was making me sick. It made me sick to my stomach. The guys brought me water, 4 bottles of water a day, the big bottles. I paid, I bought they went down to the street and they bought me water, and it cost me like 8 pounds or something. And I give them the 8 pounds and they would go, even if I give them a 10-pound note, they brought me back change. And 8 pounds is nothing. It's like 30 cents a pound. It takes 3 or 4 of these to make $1. You know what I'm saying? Egyptian pounds to make $1. So when you're talking about 8 pounds, what is 8 pounds? I'm talking about it's $8 for 4 bottles of, I think, 50 cents a piece in our money. Anyway, they're getting off that. I've been so hyped up, just like I was in Cairo when God was preaching to me. He prepared me to go to Palestine. We had plans in Palestine. The plan was, I already paid for the apartment. The apartment I was rented from September the 22nd to October the 23rd. The other way around. September the 23rd to October the 22nd, it was paid for, and it was booked for 2 more months. And I fell out when I got across a week later. When I got to the into Palestine after going to across the King Hussein's Bridge in Palestine, I had the ticket to go all the way to Ramallah. In Ramallah, there was an apartment was in Palestinian territory. But I fell out. It was the first military checkpoint for the Israelis. Now that's kind of weird because I guess because you had to go, the way the road is, you have to go through Israel. On the bus, you got to go through Israel. I guess it is Israel. I thought we were in Palestine. I'm not sure how it works. I just know it was a military checkpoint I wasn't expecting. And that's where I fell out because I couldn't do anything. And when God, the paramedics watched me for probably 45 minutes to an hour spent with me. Getting me stabilized, checking my blood pressure, checking even my EKG. These guys are good now. I'm talking about, they're checking your pulse, they're checking your temperature, they're checking even the EKG kind of thing. All this stuff, man, they're checking me. Yeah, well, at the end, they asked me, what do I want to do? Because the bus was paid to go all the way to Ramallah, but I couldn't stand. I didn't think I know what to do because, health-wise, if there was any more checkpoints like this, I couldn't go through this. I already fell out on the first checkpoint. It's hard on me. I was 72 years old, and there's no wheelchair service there. You have to walk and go through all the time, standing in line for to be searched, and these searches could take 10 to 15 minutes per person. And they're, a bus with a maxed out bus with no standing, nobody standing, everybody seated in the whole bus. We're talking about probably at least 70 people, you know what I'm saying? And they have to spend 5 to 10 minutes on each person. Of course, you got more than one inspector or guard, They're coming through like 6 lines in a row, but I still was too long for me. But God answered me. As soon as they made the offer, it says, do you want to go on back on the bus to Ramallah, or do you want to go to the, or do you want to go to the hospital? God wrote it in, and he just said, Joe, go to the hospital. You're done here. And on the way in the hospital, in the back of the ambulance, God was continuously talking to me. He said, you've done your job, Joe. You've done your job. We can do the rest from the United States. We got enough now. We don't need to go any further. Because the plan was, here's what the plan was, that everybody needs to understand what it's saying. And I'm going to repeat this when I get my website going, where I got all the stuff coming. To make, I told you all the stuff I got coming to create real podcasts professionally. But now here's what we were planning to do. During 64 AD, in 64 AD, Peter and Andrew were crucified. Peter was crucified upside down. I've got to find out how they know that too. That's what I was looking for. Where Ramallah is south of Jerusalem by about 16 miles. 16 miles, that's all. Okay? And then Jerusalem's only 16 miles south of Bethlehem. It's right in the middle. And then in between where I was, where I got stopped before I got there, we passed Jericho. Jericho could only be at 6 miles out of Jerusalem. Everything's there, just like it was in biblical times. Jericho's there, Jerusalem's there. I mean, and I'm going to tell you, it doesn't. I don't think it's changed much. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, it's desert. It is hot. It's not really nice looking, okay? Because I guess it was better looking when in Christ's time. Because the fact of the matter is that there's so much rebar, so much broken buildings, so much, old crumbled up homes and everything in the desert, just abandoned or under construction that were abandoned, either bombed. It could have been bombed, shelled. I mean, it reminded me of being in Iraq. In Iraq, I was in the war. I mean, you're talking about a real mess here, similar to what I saw in Iraq. Whether it was from war or if it was from just people leaving their homes, being built and then leave it under construction, or the other way around, I don't know. But I just know it's a mess. I don't know why people didn't, fight over this land. I know it's the Holy Land. I know it's but significant. But you think it's got to be really significant for those people to be still put up with the heat, to put up with the conditions. It's got to be really Holy Land to all of them. Jews too. Palestinians too. I mean, Bethlehem's in Palestine. It always has been in Palestine. Where Jesus was born is in Palestine. Come on now, people. Let's understand what it's all about. Jericho is in Palestine. It's all... You have to... the wash machine's going on, and that's going to take a second. I don't want to stop this thing, so you're going to have to put up with the noise. But God's talking to me big time right now. He wants me to tell you that we were headed. The plan was for me to spend 3 months. Because I'm an American, I would secretly, they don't know what I'm up to, but I would be headed to Jerusalem every day. I'm headed to Jerusalem every day through the week. every day, maybe possibly 7 days a week. I had the money. It's just a simple bus ride to travel 16 miles to Jerusalem to go to the library. When I got to the library, I was going to find Jewish students or Muslim, either Jewish or Muslims. But it would have been better to, because neither one are friends of Christians. Now there's Christians there too, and I would ask them too. I wouldn't care if they were students of Christians. I wouldn't care if they were Jewish students or if they were Muslim students. Because the fact of the matter is, I needed them to search. I would pay for the information for them to search the prison records in 64 AD. I wanted to find out what happened in 64 AD, and I had specific questions to ask. God, give me specific questions to ask. Like, for instance, did anybody know about, they know the date of the crucifixion, but was it made public? Did anybody talk to them? Were there anybody to see them? And the other thing is, how come the Christians, Peter's followers, were not aware of it? Because it had to be done in secret. This is God saying. He's trying to get the proof that it was kept, that he was not crucified. Peter was not crucified with Andrew, where the Christians knew. Otherwise, there would have been a rebellion. There was no rebellion. They just simply disappeared. Who disappeared? John was exiled to the island of Patmos. They didn't want anybody talking to John. They sent him to Ephesus on the Isle of Patmos secretly. They crucified Peter and Andrew secretly. Now, why did they crucify Peter and Andrew? Now, for this, next week when I get my computer and start writing my book, I'm also writing the newspaper. I'm putting an article in the Columbia newspaper where I was baptized in a church called Christ Center. Now, it's a Pentecostal church, and of course everybody there's pretty much speaks praise in tongues, has the gift of tongues. If they haven't, they're around it all the time. Now, this is the one catch that God made it clear to me. Peter and John, Timothy in the Bible, Timothy came to Peter and Andrew and John. Peter and Andrew were older than John. John was younger. Peter was the oldest and the wisest, and Peter the strongest and the worst tempered too. But in this case, Peter got angry here too, because what happened? Timothy come there and says, I don't know where I've got a problem because Paul leaves me with Silas. He leaves me with Silas all the time. He doesn't let me go with him. He won't let me read his books. I don't want to have any idea, but I know that he's always going and says that he's busy. He's a busy man, and he hasn't got time to explain. And he goes. Of course, he had 5 churches to go to. The 5 churches: Galatia, Ephesus, Philippi, Colossus. These 5 churches that he created, he was going to them supposedly there, and he's writing epistles to them. But he was also going to see Nero. That's the thing. I'm going ahead of the story because he was actually sent to infiltrate the Peter's church and become the sheep's and wolf's clothing. He was the sheep's and wolf's clothing. But Peter had no idea where he was going. Timothy came to him with the concerns. He says, and that's why in 2 Timothy on 3:16 and 2 Timothy, he says that anytime you talk about God, it's good to be documented. It's good for reading and be documented, right? Then it's to show proof. Show your proof of what you documented, what you say it's, and then to debate, to just talk about it, just debate it, what you see. And then the last part was to teach it. Now it's kind of the opposite with religions. Religions, they don't want to. They want to teach it, but they don't want you to read it or talk about it. Can't talk about it. They don't want you to read it either. There's no documentation and there's no proof. You see what I'm saying? It's backwards. Because religions have a lot to cover up. I mean, they accuse God of killing the Egyptian army, which is far from the truth. The truth of the matter is that they were stealing. Now, the Hebrews didn't know they were stealing. The Semites didn't know they were stealing. That built the pyramids with the Egyptians. But who knew was called the Shemites, Shemits, that knew the Sumerian language. They knew everything from Enoch's books. They were the architects, the engineers, the high priest, and everything that knew the secrets of every pyramid. The pyramids in themselves are really not cubical, but they're square, perfectly square silos. That's where they used to hold the grain, even water. They stored water. They might have stored beer because the Sumerians taught them how to store beer. I'm talking about these people built these pyramids to hold things. The reason why they're cubical silos, they would fall over. I mean, you talk about Khufu's pyramid, 465 feet tall. 465 feet tall. These silos, these square cubicle, not cubicle, but whatever you want to call it, they're square, tall silos. Had to be supported on each side. The base, of course, had to be wider than the top, because the farther you go up, they were built. The walls of a pyramid are solid, but then there's a space in between the square corners, and that's where the sand was backfilled in. Not just backfilled in. The sand was backfilled in, that's true. But every level they built, they were flooding the Nile. They raised the water level of the Nile. Every step of the pyramid, they raised the water level, and they flooded the Nile, and they added the sand, because wet sand compacts. It gets really, really hard. Okay? So between the cubical silo, or the square silo in the middle, and the walls that were still solid with sand, okay? When they drained there's no way the sand could go when they lowered the Nile, and they didn't lower it, they just released it and went back to its normal level. But every time they needed to transfer the granite stones at first, and then the smaller stones later, the granite stones came from pretty far off in Upper Egypt, which is really Lower Egypt. Okay, it's in southern Egypt. But they transferred the stones they flooded them and put them almost right straight in place, and then the hollow space they backfilled simply with sand. As soon as the water started draining, they were just filling it up with sand. But the sand compacted inside the pyramid. Now in Khufu's pyramid, the giant pyramid, That was actually built for Pharaoh. That was built, Khufu and Khafre's pyramid and the one next to it, they were built for the pharaohs. But all originally, all the pyramids were built, like started out in Kush, in the land of Kush, in the Sudan, in Ethiopia. 10,000 or more pyramids are all through there. They were all storage things. They held grain, they held beer, they held water, they held everything. And then they were used as tombs later. After, at some point, they were used as tombs at the end. But that's what they were built for, and that's why they were kind of rugged looking. Now Khufu's pyramid is a masterpiece because they plastered over it and gave it a golden capstone. But the Egyptians, they didn't have any idea with the Semites and the thing. They were all happy. They were drinking beer. They couldn't drink the water of the Nile. They had to drink. Everybody had to drink beer. Because that's when the Sumerians told them, you want to get rid of the malaria, you want to get rid of the dysentery, the typhoid, and different diseases, you need to drink this. And that's when they taught the Egyptians how to make beer, and that's what they did. And they could build silos full of those beers and the grains. And everybody was well fed in Egypt. In fact, there's more pigs bones found in Egypt than there are any other kind of animal. But you don't see that on the walls of the pyramid. You don't see it anywhere. It's not a mention, but where did all those pork bones come from? There's more than any other. They certainly eaten them. They were drinking beer. Muslims and Islam doesn't drink alcohol or eat beer. But getting on with it, the pyramids, like I said, they were built as they flooded the Nile each time. When they floated a barge down, they simply dammed up the day, and they floated the things right in place. And then they probably set fire to the barge that was on. Why not? Why would they want to keep it? They have to set it anyway, and if you burn it, it's going to set down in place. You see what I'm saying? There's a lot of things that we don't think about, haven't thought about. We're kind of dummies because we just accept everything. But you see, Timothy went to, just getting back to the story about Timothy. Timothy went with his doubts. He said, they're up to something. He's always going someplace. When he's writing, I don't know where he's going. So they watched Peter and Andrew and John, waited for him to come back from one of his escapades with one of his churches or wherever he was gone. He came back. Now, Paul was not stupid. In fact, he's too smart for his own good. But Paul was never, the guards were never that far from Paul. They were watching him closely within his calling. If he had screamed or anything, which that happened up his home, the guards were right there. You're in Jerusalem, for God's sake. I'm talking about Jerusalem. How is this there? And when you're right there where Nero's at, the palace is at, and this happened in Jerusalem. I mean, it was right there in the same town. We're not talking about Jericho. We're not talking about Bethlehem. We're talking about they were there. Paul was staying right there in Jerusalem, right next to Nero. Peter, of course, he was in Bethlehem. You see what I'm saying? 16 miles away. But one hand didn't know what the other one was up to. You see what I'm saying? They didn't keep up with each other because Peter, Paul was sent to infiltrate the Catholic, Peter's church, but I wanted to start this thing over with this noise, but I don't want to because I've already said a lot. And I don't want to repeat this. So you can hear this noise in background. I'm still going to make this video. Because the point, here's the thing. I don't know why I even started this wash machine. Okay, the point I'm trying to say, Paul came back. And Paul came back. John and Peter and Andrew had broken into his home, and they had his books out, and they were reading everything he had wrote. And it was news to them, all the churches that he was writing to, all the epistles. Now, if you guys think about it, only 3 people in the Bible that I'm thinking of now: Peter, James, and John are the only epistles in the Bible. Matthew. Peter, James, John, and Matthew are the only 4. Out of the 27 books inside the Bible, only 4, maybe 5 because Judas has a book, I believe, okay, were actual apostles. Luke was an apostle, although he wasn't, I don't know what his involvement was with Paul. But I know Mark was with Paul all the time. Now, what the writing was that they discovered, the main thing, I speak in tongues. I've been since 50 years old. For 22 years, I've been praying in tongues. You pray in tongues and you know tongues, you know that the language of tongues cannot be interpreted. It's not meant to be interpreted. It's between your communication and God. We don't need a go-between between you and God. We drive the car, remember? It's just God and I. I run the crane. It's just God and I. We don't need somebody in between talking for us. We don't need to have a priest to say confession between me and God when God lives inside me. You understand where I'm coming from? So apparently, the people that speak in tongue didn't catch on to this, and still can't catch on this, and I didn't catch on to it either until God told me. He said, that was never me. That was never you speaking in tongue. That was me. I just gave God voice. I gave God a voice. Now, if I just gave God a voice, it can't be interpreted. It's God speaking. Okay? It wasn't meant for anybody else except for me to interpret if I and I'm the only one that could interpret, possibly. Nobody, and I don't know word for word what God's saying, but I know what I'm thinking. And I know what God's telling me, just like right now. God's had me up all night like a sermon. He's all excited. He talks like a sermon. And this is what I can't understand. I almost got to make this thing over because of this stupid wash machine. It's just stupid that I'd have to stop and make try to remake this, which is impossible to do because of a wash machine. That's the way the world happens. But maybe I'm going to leave it go for an example. This is like driving the car with somebody in the back seat or somebody in the passenger side telling you how to drive it. This is like somebody saying, you're going the wrong way, you got to turn around or looking for side streets. Or the phone ringing. Or somebody texting you. This is exactly what the wash machine is doing, the same thing. It's a distraction. I don't know by what force these things have happened mystically. We could say it's Satan, we could say it's, but even Christ said, we war with principalities. And I think these principalities are humans. The evilness of humans. Because every human has a soul. Okay? And that soul is like a spirit. Besides God's spirit, of life. You have you can, when man decided to start doing his own will, when man started getting corrupt, when man started doing his own thing, we got worse and worse and worse until we killed, and now killing is a norm in the world. The whole world, everybody accepts that killing is a norm. They even they claim that God killed. No way God would kill. He lives inside each one of us. He has a very good reason not to kill, because we have in our DNA. Everybody that's living in our DNA is alive. Everybody that's our unborn, everybody's got unborn in them. They're all alive in us too. So when God's not wouldn't be just killing that one evil person, he's killing their DNA. He's killing all the unborn, all their unborn. Are they wrong? But then the Christian religion would say that, yeah, they're all born in sin. My God, who's the sinners here? The real sinners are the Christians. Thank God. The real sinners are the Christians. They claim that they are the chosen ones. They claim that they're the ones going to heaven. They're the ones that are made, and everybody else is going to hell. This is the stupidest thing that people aren't realizing. Well, what happened with Paul? They discovered the scriptures and had it open to the page. And Paul knew exactly what they were looking at. He said, I would rather speak 5 words of understanding than 10,000 words in tongues. Now, I just told you, tongues is God speaking. It's not my speaking. I thought for 20 years it was me praying in the tongues. It was me talking to God. No, it was God talking to me. What I was thinking was what God was telling me. But he was talking in his voice to me, the opposite. Now, Paul said, I'd rather speak 5 words of understanding. He called for people to prophesy. He called for people to interpret. He called for all kinds of people to come between us, or even just don't even pay us no attention. The people that prophesied know more than we do. They just make up a story, make up anything they want. Oh, God said this, do this. God said drink that. God said do, they know anything about God. How can any pastor, like I was told you yesterday, how can a pastor even come close to bringing you to God if he doesn't know God? He can't teach you about God. He can't bring you to God. He doesn't even know himself where God's at. I told you that. Well, what happened is Peter lost his temper. As soon as Paul, he read that thing, and Paul read that words, first thing Peter did was grab him by the throat. Whew. It wasn't really, he didn't grab him by the throat. Paul screamed, help, 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 guards, guards, guards. Yeah, Paul started screaming. Peter grabbed him by the throat to keep him about crushed his larynx, trying to get him to stop screaming. Out for the guards. Of course, the guards came. Took Peter, took John, took Andrew. And they had to do something with them. What did they do? The first thing they did was get John out of there. Sent him to the Isle of Patmos. Actually, John knew that they crucified him. Yeah, it wasn't hidden from him. That's why they had to get him out on the Isle of Patmos, because he knew what they had done. They crucified Peter, and to keep him from talking, they put him on the Isle of Patmos. Instead of crucifying John, they needed a security. They need to keep him around just in case the Christians found out. That's what I was there to find out. Why there was not a rebellion when they went to crucify Peter and Andrew. And instead of that, everybody disappeared. Boom. They disappeared from 64 AD to 68 AD. For what happened in 68 AD, all hell broke loose. Why? Because Paul came back and he said, with 2nd John and 3rd John and 2nd Peter and 3rd Peter's books. Now, John didn't have a second book. Hadn't written a second book. Neither did he write a third book. And the same with Peter. Peter was dead. How could he write something? But they claimed, because nobody knew that Peter was dead, he said, well, Peter started. And if you read those two epistles in Peter's, they were very short and it's kind of odd, unto the point. Is talking about a Mary. And the only Mary that could have been possibly was Mary Magdalene, because the mother of Christ was dead. She died the same right after Jesus was crucified, 33 AD. You know? And so what I'm saying is, in Matthew died in, I think it was 12 AD, before Mary. So Matthew's writings had changed. They were changed too. But they found that out in 68 AD. They looked through all his papers. They finally, the Christians were made aware by Paul coming there and says, well, they're missing, but I found these books I found these books that Peter wrote, these two books that Peter started, and I found these books of John, and one of those books was Revelations. Guess what they did? They killed them on the spot. They killed Paul on the spot, and that was a rebellion. They killed Paul on the spot, and they killed Mark on the spot. Up to 22 books of the Bible had to be manifested. They weren't from the original apostles. They weren't, and everybody, even the original apostles, even Matthew. Some of Matthew's writings, especially in the last chapters, talking about Revelations. The whole chapter was about Revelations. I think it's in chapter 28. How could Matthew had known about this, what Paul was going to write in Revelations? Mark certainly wrote about it, the same as Matthew. They called themselves apostles, self-appointed apostles. They wrote a whole different gospel. The gospel of Paul is not the same as the gospel of Jesus Christ. There's differences. You can almost read the differences in Acts. There's mistakes in Acts, but more so, anybody that speaks in tongue immediately. I mean, when I found out I've been speaking in tongues 20 years, and God told me that, He says, "How come you didn't catch that?" Paul never knew had the Holy Spirit. He never spoke in tongues. He is the Antichrist. The Christians are following the papers that came out when Constantine became Pope, the first Pope. Well, I don't know if it's Constantine or it was, it had to be Constantine. It could have been Augustus. But anyway, no, it couldn't have been Augustus. I'm thinking wrong. But Constantine. All they did was restore. They canonized all the writings of Paul. They canonized all the writings of Paul. And they threw out everything else. They threw out the book of Enoch at the same time. They threw out both books of Enoch. They threw out the book of Jubilees. You know, where Adam had 23 sons and 33 daughters. Besides, you know, after Eve. That's in the book of Jubilee. And there's a reason for that, and I'll tell you about that later on. But it was actually from one of God's commandments. The reason that happened, and I'll explain that. But anyway, Paul and Mark were killed in 68 AD. I was going to be in Ramallah to pay students. Now think about it. I'd be paying students that were Jewish. Of course, they would love to find out what the Christians were up to no good. And so would the Muslims. And the Christians themselves, it'd be an eye-opener. They needed to find out. They would be seeing the proof right in front of them. They wouldn't have to have convincing. So I had a plan, but I couldn't physically, because God said, we've done enough. We can do it from home. You go home. We're going to go home, Joe. Now, this is how I ended up in the hospital in Jerusalem. I even had to go into psychiatric care because I couldn't pay the hospital bill because my card in Jordan was on a Friday night, but when I couldn't get in touch with the bank, you know, there's a 9-hour difference between one place and another. So you when my card, they took my card from me to pay my visa, and they took my card from me, and I had to give him my PIN. He punched my PIN in right one time and wrong two more times. Well, the first time it went through, but the second time and third time, that blocks it, and there's no way I can get it reopened and get anything from my card until I can get in touch with them in the States. Well, guess what? It's Friday, 9 hours difference. Can't get to the Saturday, Sunday. So on Sunday, and on Saturday when I got there, I didn't have any money except for what I had on me. Some Egyptian money. When you get in Jordan, they don't take Egyptian money. Well, when I got to Palestine, they didn't take Egyptian money either. They wouldn't take Jordan money. All these countries are at war with each other. So the problem of it is that nobody's taking each other's money, and you got to have new money, and I didn't have a debit card to get any money. So I ended up in the hospital, and I can't pay my bill. But to pay my bill, I says, arrest me. I can't pay the bill. Just arrest me. Put me in jail. We don't do that. We can't do that. We're not here to throw you in jail. Well, you have no choice. Then I told them, I've come here anyway to die. I've come here to die. You know, I'll stay right here in this hospital until I'm dead, or you're there to commit me. So they brought in the head shrinks, this woman, 35 years. She's the hospital head shrink. And I says, I want you to commit me. Commit me. I'm crazy. I come here to die. I'm gonna be. You can't do nothing about it. You got to commit me. She says, why are you here to die? I says, well, I'm either here. You won't put me in jail. And it says, at least if you put me in jail, God can go on and get a fair trial. Me and God can go on trial. I said, either God's crazy and a murderer, or you guys are crazy. Can you guys, it says, you guys realize that the world saying that killing is, you're justifying killing, and killing is the norm, and then you claim that God is a murderer? God wants to go on trial. He wants a trial to say, who's lying here? Somebody's telling is saying that either if I'm a mass murderer, like they claim I did with the Pharaoh's army, and it says, and you guys are killing in the name of God, and it was never that way. I need to be defended. God needs to be defended. And then she said something, and I said, wait just a second. You didn't spend 35 years becoming of your life, as a psychiatrist, and now you're the head psychiatrist. You didn't spend your whole life becoming, and you become a psychiatrist without God. Everything you are and everything you are in life have accomplished, you didn't do it without God. And if you think you did, then that means you're atheist. And if you did, I'm wondering why you're in Jerusalem at all. She said, we're going to send you, we're getting you thing. You're going to the office. They'll have you sign some forms. You'll have to pay the bill after you can get home, back to the States or wherever you're at. But right now you're going to leave the hospital. You cannot come back into the hospital. Not to sit in the lobby, not to go to the bathroom. Just, you got to leave the hospital. You're not allowed back in. That's what the psychiatrist did to me. I'll show you. I stayed on the outside of the hospital and didn't have a dime to my name. Well, I had Egyptian money in me. I had a couple of dinars in me. A few dinars. I saw that biker. A biker. I didn't know he's a biker. He's just a man eating he looked like he's eating a McDonald's hamburger and fries and a milkshake. He was on another bench, not really close to me either, but I could watch him. He was pigging out like crazy. I mean, he was like starving. He had to eat that. I mean, he had a big old sandwich, like more like a Burger King Whopper. And he was eating that Whopper, like waffling it down in those fries, like he was starving and drinking that milkshake. He was in a hurry. I got up before he could finish it, and I walked over to him, and I said, "Sir, do you speak English?" He says, "I'm American." Well, how does something like that happen if it wasn't for God being there? Do you see? I'm American. I'm a biker. That is jokingly. God said, "You a hell's angel?" He looked and he says, "I'm God's angel." His answer, God, I'm God's angel. No, I'm not hell's angel. I'm God's angel. I told him what was going on. They couldn't go back in the hospital for nothing, not even to use the bathroom. He walked over to the taxi cab and was there for about 10, 15 minutes talking to the cab driver. Next thing, he comes back over to me and he says, "Okay, I've arranged for the cab to take you to the American Embassy. Take you straight to the American Embassy. When you get there, get to the front door and stay there. Make so they have to see you, and they'll take care of you." Then he handed me 130 shekels. Yeah, I didn't have no shekels on me, and that's all he taken. He gave me 130 shekels. He says, and I said I was going to give him the Jordan dinars, and he goes, "No, you keep those. You keep dinars," but he says those dinars are worth 5 times more than the shekels. I had plenty of money to go to take a cab to the embassy if they had taken the dinar. Plenty of money, but they didn't. But they wouldn't take Jordan money. Do you see how complicated this thing gets? And the thing, because I'm telling you, I've been through a lot. The embassy got me back to the United States because I was told them the same thing. I'm not going to eat. I haven't eaten in this is the 4th week and haven't eaten nothing. And I'm not going to eat. You're not until you guys figure this out. Well, they figured it out. The next day they had me sign the forms to give me to fly me home. With the voucher, I had to pay them back. But they did get me home. As soon as they said that and they had it prepared, when I got the paper, the thing to sign it, they said, "Will you let me buy you breakfast, something to eat?" I hadn't eaten 45 days. So I had to fix an omelet with mushrooms, delicious omelet. But it was so big, huge. But the thing about it is, I have so much to tell you people. And I will be telling you the whole story. But Paul, it doesn't matter whether you find out Paul's Antichrist or not. The fact of the matter is, everybody that you believe in the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, are murderers, and they made themselves look like heroes. So every religion, I don't care what religion there is in the world, if you don't know God's living inside you, then you don't know God, and you shouldn't be telling anybody, trying to that you think you can lead somebody to God when you hadn't even got a clue where that God lives inside you. Starting that with, you wouldn't tell anybody they're going to hell. You wouldn't be making judgments. I'm going to leave you with that because this has gone on long enough. But this is an important message. Good night.